Hey everybody, it's Brian Shannon from Alphatrends.net. Today is Friday, the 5th of April, 2024. We had a pretty much down week for the markets here, with the exception of the energy names. You can see that Biotechs were the worst, down close to 5%. Outside of, actually, that's not true. Oil was down 7%. Is that right? Maybe I didn't update them properly. Let's take a look here in a moment. But anyways, let's take a look at these charts and make some sense of it. So the anchored volume weighted average price from that last touch over here that we've been looking at was kind of where we came into, and more important on the 30-minute time frame. Let's take a look at that 30-minute time frame, because on Wednesday I had sketched in this scenario here. We hadn't seen this action yet right in here. I had sketched in a rally up towards that 5-day moving average, then a failure that would bring us down to this 513.5 level. Well, instead, on Thursday, we gapped significantly higher, and then we fell apart after some comments from the Fed cash carry. Anyways, we came right down to the measured move from that double top. So as I mentioned on Twitter, one of my favorite quotes about the market is from Linda Raschke, and she says, the markets will do the most obvious thing in the least obvious way, meaning they got there, but they certainly didn't take the path that I thought was a scenario. So anyways, we ended the week, the volatile week, with losses here, and it just kind of reminds me of the phrase that Soros says, which is volatility peaks at turning points and diminishes with the trend. I'm not calling for a top by any measure, but I am noting that we have unusual volatility this week. We're right up, close to these all-time highs still, and this recent range has, we're still stuck in that range. And on the downside, we've got a short-term trend line that held here, so we'll keep a look on some of these other trend lines as well. But most important, we are below the declining 5-day moving average going into next week. So that's where my focus is. We rallied up strong today, nice snapback, but held below that declining 5-day moving average. So that still cast a shadow of suspicion on the intermediate term time frame. The daily time frame, we're still in a powerful uptrend from these lows 110 days ago. The anchored VWAP from there is down at 480, and the year-to-date anchor is getting pretty close to the round number of 500. If we fall back down a little bit further next week, I think that it's likely we'll see a test of the 50-day moving average and perhaps undercut that a little bit. So just a little bit of caution heading back into next week. The Nasdaq remains range bound, and that range is getting tight. It's not actually getting tighter, but it's getting tested with more frequency. That is, we ran right into the high end of that range on Thursday and back down to the low end of it on Thursday as well. Today was an inside day. All of today's trading range occurred within the prior day's range. We held the 50-day moving average, which is rising, and we're still holding this band of support that we've been talking about. So if we're going to see further weakness in the Nasdaq, we look to the 30-minute time frame. And what I see over here really is just a big choppy mess. Let's clean up a lot of that. The blue is the week-to-date volume-weighted average price, and that orange is the 5-day moving average. We're declining and below that. I think you've got to be a little bit cautious as long as we're below 447-ish. That's where we found supply recently. And if we drop a little bit further, then I think we're highly likely to come down to the test of the year-to-date anchored VWAP. That would bring us down a little bit below 430, and personally, I would welcome that. I think it's a good thing for the market. The Russell 2000, as I mentioned on Wednesday, it's just too damn choppy to trade. I'm not interested in this type of activity. It is holding this trend line that we noted. It is above the 50-day moving average, and on the weekly time frame, we look over here and see, we're still kind of battling with that prior band of support rather, up in this area. So this prior support, is that why we're stalling out in this area? Because there's, there's supply being released from the people who own it back there? Possible, but I look to the 30-minute time frame, and I see a choppy mess. I see no reason to really be involved in here, and especially below the declining 5-day moving average. I think if you break below and hold below 203, 203, 203.5 for more than an hour or two next week, then it's likely we're going to head to the year-to-date anchor in this market as well. Semiconductors are still resilient. This is what I had sketched in last night, thinking maybe we would rally up towards this 224 level and then begin to pull back. We did that a little bit, but we're holding above the anchor from this low right here. The 20-day moving average, notice it is declining as we got rid of these days over here, averaged those out with days that are lower, then we're stuck below the 20-day moving average, which is an intermediate term caution. And the declining 5-day moving average tells me realistically, below 224, I think they're guilty until proven innocent. Back above 224, maybe they become a little bit more neutral, but I'm looking at this as really a reason for caution in this market overall. That anchor, so I suppose, doesn't have a lot of validity. I think that if we were to see this market fall next week, again, highly likely would come down to the 50-day moving average, and I certainly wouldn't put a bid in at that 50-day moving average. I think it's maybe going to undercut it a little bit, and then perhaps we rally back up towards that 20-day moving average, and that's of course if it declines. But below, like I said, 224 intermediate term is neutral. Below 230, we've got to get really back above 230, this resistance that's been in here recently, to see the ability to push to a new all-time high, and I just don't think that's very likely right now. We're going to talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum in a moment as well. Biotechs continue to decline in here. This is what I've been telling Alphatrends subscribers that we're likely going to see, which is a test of the anchor from the October low. That would bring us down in towards this 86 level. We broke the year-to-date anchor, and this week we gave up some, whatever the percentage was. They were down close to 5%, I think I said. But we're stuck below this prior little band of support, and as long as we're below that, we're guilty until proven innocent. As long as we're below this declining 5-day moving average, guilty until proven innocent. So don't look to be a buyer of those. Wait for the buyers to regain control. Let the institutions do the dirty work of creating the support. And that support may come in here, or it may continue down. We don't know. That's just a level of interest where I'm going to start to think, all right, now maybe it's time to look at the shorter term time frame for evidence the buyers are in fact gaining control. Financials still having trouble with that breakout level from the all-time high over here. This is the third week that we're kind of consolidating around this area, and so far it's just a correction through time. Now we have this little band in here of prior resistance, which held as support, so that's a good thing. That's also pretty much the measured move, but with it below the declining 5-day moving average, it wouldn't surprise me also to see a pull back deeper in here, maybe even all the way to the 50-day moving average, just to catch people off guard and grab some stops. So as I always say, your job during an uptrend is to ride the trend for the time frame you're involved in. And when the intermediate term trend shows lower highs and lower lows with a declining 5-day moving average, it means tighten up your stops. Know where you want to start to take some profits, and maybe you take partial profits and then you look to reestablish along if it bounces from the 50-day moving average. You don't have to make all of your decisions based on one time frame. Let's see, energy names. Again, they just continue to ramp higher. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, just because we're breaking out doesn't mean that we need to sell some to the breakout crowd, but they often break out and fail. This one is not. It's continuing to move higher. So the job in there is to continue to raise your stops. Silver, I had mentioned, having a beautiful breakout. I told subscribers on Sunday night about this one, and just a huge run in silver, and that's starting to play some catch up to gold. Let's take a look at the cryptos, and then we'll go back to some of the leading stocks. I didn't mention Bitcoin in the Wednesday video. I do that pretty much every day for subscribers to Alphatrends. I don't give it all away here. And as I mentioned in last week's video, we spoke about the market losing this level. And if it broke below that, then you probably shouldn't be long from an intermediate term perspective. I got out of my Bitcoin. This is looking now like it might just be a shakeout. So this could be a shakeout in this area right in here. And to me, that's a good thing. If we can prove that in this level that we can hold still above here and then get back above probably about 69.5 or so, then I think that this will prove to be a shakeout and Bitcoin continue to move higher. I'm cautiously long a little bit of that. I've got a more Ethereum. This is the third time we've tested this level. Now it's true though that the more times any level of support is tested, the more likely it is to fail to hold. But if it breaks below probably 3150 or so, 3160, then I'm likely to get out. I did, as I mentioned to subscribers, buy it in here, and we were targeting this level as a place of resistance, so I got out of it. Now I'm back involved in here. It really, and with a small piece. If it can get back above here, then I think you're going to see that Ethereum can continue to move higher. So I'm still bullish on those, but just a little bit cautious, more so in the intermediate term. Let's talk about NVIDIA, because NVIDIA, we know, has been holding above the anchored volume weighted average price from that last earnings, and this has been an important level. Well, yesterday we saw what looks to me like a shakeout below that. So we don't automatically buy these tests. We buy strength as it moves away from there. We still have a declining 5-day moving average. Monday, we get rid of this data. Tuesday, we get rid of this data. So it still might be a couple days, and that's okay. Maybe NVIDIA does something like this and continues to move higher. But I definitely have an eye on NVIDIA for next week. What were some of the other stocks I wanted to talk about? It looks like AMD has kind of failed in here. This one broke the year-to-date anchored volume weighted average price. It's still got that declining 20-day moving average. I think as long as it's below the year-to-date anchor at about 176, stay away from AMD for new purchases. 175, 176. If it remains stuck below there, it's guilty till proven innocent. If it does something like this, well, then that will end up being a shakeout, and then we can look at it from the long side. But right now, it's too early to be a buyer with it below the 50-day moving average, which is just starting to flatten out as we got rid of this data today. And the 20-day moving average is obviously in a steep decline here because we're getting rid of data from up in these days all week. So that's why it took such a strong move lower this week, the 20-day moving average, because we got rid of these 5 days in its calculation. So you always want to anticipate the direction of those moving averages, not just observe where they are, but try to think ahead and say, what will make it happen? You notice in my analysis, I'm not chasing things. I'm always trying to anticipate where the buyers might take in control, and then how can I get involved in a low-risk way? That's what I do every day for Alphatrends subscribers. If you haven't taken a look, come subscribe or take a 2-week trial and see for yourself. I've got a Discord room in there as well, so that'll do it. Have a good weekend. Thanks for tuning in.